Most people don't collapse when life gets hard. They collapse the moment it stops being comfortable. Not because the world is unfair, but because their mind was never trained for pressure. They react too quickly. They trust too easily. They feel too deeply in a world that studies those feelings and uses them. And when the test finally comes, they don't break from impact. They break from within. Machiavelli understood something dangerous about this. Your mind is not just where you think. It's where you are ruled, or where you rule. If you don't take control of it, someone else will, through fear, through approval, through manipulation so subtle you won't even notice it happening. But here's the truth, most people never hear. Mental strength is not about being positive, it's about being untouchable. And in this video, I will show you exactly how to build that kind of mind. A mind that doesn't react, doesn't fold, doesn't get controlled. So if you're ready to stop being predictable and start becoming dangerous, hit like, subscribe and turn on notifications, because what comes next will change how you see yourself forever. Now let's break down the 7 ruthless lessons that make you mentally untouchable. Most people lose before they ever speak, and they never realize it's happening. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they have no control over how they are perceived. You assume people judge you based on truth, logic, or intention. They don't. They judge you based on signals. Your posture, your tone, your timing, your silence. The human mind is wired to scan for stability, not sincerity. It doesn't ask, is this person right? It asks, is this person solid or uncertain? And it decides before you even finish your sentence. That's the mechanism. Perception is not cosmetic, it is structural. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. Reality does not move based on what is true, it moves based on what is believed. And belief is shaped by what is visible, not what is hidden. So when you appear unsure, even if you are correct, you weaken your position. When you appear composed, even if you are still calculating, you gain space. People hesitate. They adjust. This is where most people surrender power without noticing. They try to be understood instead of controlling the frame. Someone challenges you, and your instinct is to explain. That's not what I meant, let me clarify. Now you're defending. Now you're reacting. You've stepped into their frame and accepted their authority to question you. But watch the alternative. You pause. You hold your ground. You respond with something minimal, controlled. That's one interpretation. And you stop. No urgency. No need to convince. The tension shifts instantly. Now they're uncertain. Now they have to fill the silence you left behind, and in that space they expose themselves. That's the inversion. When you over-explain, you leak control. When you compress your words, you concentrate it. People don't experience you directly, they experience the story they construct about you. And the less you interfere, the more that story works in your favor. Calm becomes strength. Restraint becomes authority. Repetition becomes identity. You don't need to force respect, you condition it. Over time, your presence speaks before you do. And once that happens, you're no longer reacting to perception, you're directing it. Control the frame or be defined by someone else's version of you. And once perception is no longer your weakness, the real threat begins, because even a controlled image can still be broken by an uncontrolled mind. You don't lose control when someone attacks you. You lose control the moment they make you feel something. Anger, frustration, the need to respond. That surge inside you isn't random, it's access. The moment someone can trigger your emotions, they gain leverage over your behavior. And behavior is what reveals you. This is the mechanism most people never see. Emotion is not just a feeling, it's an entry point. Once activated, it bypasses logic and exposes your patterns. And predictable patterns are easy to manipulate. Machiavelli understood this at a level most people avoid. He didn't trust emotional reactions because they are immediate, and anything immediate can be anticipated. The person who reacts quickly is not strong, he is readable. And the moment you are readable, you are controllable. So detachment is not about becoming cold. It's about removing access. It's the discipline of feeling without leaking. You still experience anger, disappointment, even pain, but you don't let it dictate your timing or your response. You observe it the way you would observe a stranger's behavior with distance. That distance is where control lives. Watch how this plays out in a simple moment. Someone disrespects you in a conversation. The average response is instant. Tone rises, words sharpen, energy shifts. You try to correct them, defend yourself, prove your position. But what actually happens? You reveal exactly where you are sensitive. You show them the button, and whether they realize it or not, they now know where to press next time. Now contrast that with restraint. You hear the same disrespect. You pause. Your expression doesn't change. Your voice stays even, if that's how you see it. And then silence. No escalation, no emotional spike. What happens next is subtle but powerful. The other person feels the absence of reaction. Their energy has nowhere to land, and without resistance, it starts collapsing inward. They second-guess, they overthink, they lose their footing. That's psychological control, not dominance through force, but through non-participation. Most people believe being real means expressing everything they feel. But uncontrolled expression is exposure. It hands over your internal map to anyone paying attention. The disciplined mind does the opposite. It filters, it delays, it chooses when emotion is useful and when it is a liability. You're not your emotions. You're the one who decides which of them gets to speak. Once you internalize that, everything changes. Insults lose their weight. Pressure loses its urgency. You stop reacting to noise and start analyzing patterns. You begin to see people not as threats, but as predictable systems driven by impulse. And in that moment, you become difficult to move. Not because you feel less, but because nothing controls what you do with what you feel. Control your emotions, or someone else will use them to control you. And once you are no longer emotionally accessible, the next illusion begins to break, because even if you can't be manipulated, you can still be blindsided if you believe people won't turn on you. You don't get betrayed because people are evil. You get betrayed because you believed they wouldn't. That belief is the real weakness, not their actions, your expectation. Most people move through life assuming loyalty is stable, that if someone smiles, supports you, stands beside you today, they will do the same tomorrow. But that assumption ignores a fundamental truth about human behavior. People don't stay loyal to you, they stay loyal to their interests, and the moment those interests change, so does their position. This is the mechanism. Loyalty is conditional even when it feels emotional. It is sustained by benefit, proximity, convenience, or timing, not by words, not by promises, and definitely not by how much you've invested in them. Machiavelli didn't warn against betrayal because he was cynical. He warned against it because he understood patterns. The person who expects consistency in a self-interested world will always be caught off guard. And surprise is where you lose control. So the shift is simple but uncomfortable. You stop trusting blindly and you start observing strategically. You no longer listen to what people say. You track what they do when there is nothing to gain. You watch how they behave under pressure when loyalty costs them something. That's where truth lives. Look at a common situation. A colleague supports you when things are easy, agrees with you in meetings, aligns with your ideas. The average response? You trust them, you open up, you share more, you assume alignment. Then pressure hits, stakes rise. Suddenly they distance themselves, stay quiet, or worse, position themselves against you, and now you feel blindsided. But the signs were always there. You just didn't look for them. Now contrast that with strategic awareness. You still engage, you still collaborate, but you don't anchor your stability to them. You build your position so that if they shift, nothing collapses. Your decisions don't depend on their loyalty. Your progress doesn't rely on their consistency. You design independence into your structure. That's the inversion. You don't avoid people. You stop depending on them. Most people get hurt, not because betrayal is rare, but because they treat it like an exception instead of a pattern. They give trust too early, too fully, without testing it against time and adversity. The disciplined mind does the opposite. It allows connection, but it verifies alignment. It values patterns over promises. It prepares quietly for change without becoming paranoid. You don't need to become cold. You need to become aware. Because once you accept that people can shift, you stop reacting emotionally when they do. You see it for what it is, information, not tragedy, and information gives you control. You adjust, you reposition, you move without hesitation. The one who anticipates betrayal is never controlled by it. And once you stop being surprised by people, you begin to see something else clearly. Not just what they might do, but how they react under pressure. Because the next level of power isn't just expecting change, it's remaining completely still when everything around you starts to collapse. Chaos doesn't expose weakness, it reveals who was never in control to begin with. Most people think calmness is personality. It's not. It's discipline under pressure, and that's why it's rare. When tension rises, the average mind speeds up. Voice gets louder. Movements become sharper. Decisions become rushed. They believe reacting quickly means staying in control. In reality, it's the opposite. Speed without clarity is exposure. This is the mechanism. Under pressure, the brain defaults to emotion first, logic second. And once emotion leads behavior, becomes predictable. The person who panics reveals everything, their priorities, their fears, their limits. They become easy to read, and once you are readable, you are manageable. Machiavelli saw calmness as a form of silent authority, not because it looks impressive, but because it disrupts expectation. When others expect you to react and you don't, their model of you breaks. And in that moment of uncertainty, you gain control. Watch how this plays out. A situation escalates. Someone raises their voice, tries to pressure you, push you into a quick decision. The average response: match the energy, defend your position, speak faster, louder, more aggressively. But now you're inside their tempo. You're playing their game. Now shift the response. You slow down. Your tone stays level. Your movements minimal. You take a pause before answering. Let's think this through. No urgency, no tension. The dynamic changes instantly. They either calm down or they become more erratic. And if they become more erratic, they expose themselves even further. That's the inversion. Calmness doesn't just protect you, it destabilizes others, because most people rely on emotional momentum to maintain control. When that momentum meets stillness, it collapses. They don't know how to adjust, and that confusion gives you space to observe, to think, to choose. But this isn't about pretending to be calm. It's about training your internal response. Every time something triggers you, you ask one question: does reacting improve my position? If the answer is no, you don't move. That pause becomes your advantage. The disciplined mind separates feeling from display. You might feel pressure, frustration, even anger, but none of it leaks into your behavior unless it serves you. That's control, not suppression, but selection. Over time, this becomes identity. People stop trying to provoke you because they get no return. They stop pushing because they can't read your limits. You become stable in environments where others collapse. And stability under pressure is interpreted as power. You don't need to dominate the room. You need to remain centered when the room loses control, because the one who controls his internal state controls the tempo, and the one who controls the tempo controls the outcome. Stay still when others rush. Stay quiet when others escalate. Stay clear when others confuse themselves. Calm is not weakness, it is controlled distance from chaos, and once you master that distance, something else begins to emerge. Not just control in moments of tension, but control in how much of yourself you reveal at all. Because even calm minds can lose power if they talk too much. The more you speak, the less control you have. Not because words are weak, but because most people use them without precision. Every unnecessary sentence reveals something: your priorities, your emotions, your intentions. And once those patterns are visible, they can be predicted. That's the mechanism. Information is leverage, and most people give it away just to feel understood. Machiavelli understood that power is not in expression, it's in restraint. The less others know about what you think, the harder it is to position against you. Silence is not emptiness, it is compression. It holds energy without exposing direction. Look at how most conversations unfold. Someone questions you, challenges you, or simply tries to fill space. The average response is immediate. You explain, expand, justify, add context. You try to make sure nothing is misunderstood. But in doing that, you reveal too much. You show where you hesitate, where you care, where you can be pushed. Now shift the response. You listen longer than necessary. You answer only what is required. You leave space after your words, instead of rushing to fill it. That's noted. And you stop. No elaboration, no need to prove. What happens next is subtle. The other person keeps talking. They try to interpret your silence. They expose their assumptions, their intentions, their insecurities. While you remain closed, they become transparent. That's the inversion. Silence doesn't block information. It redirects it. Most people talk to protect their ego. They feel uncomfortable with pauses, so they fill them. But that discomfort is exactly where control is built. When you can sit in silence without needing to explain yourself, you force others to carry the conversation. And in doing so, they reveal more than they intended. In negotiations, this is decisive. The one who speaks first often weakens their position. The one who waits collects data. Tone shifts. Word choices. Micro-expressions. All of it becomes visible when you are not busy talking. But silence is not just external, it's internal. It's the ability to stop the urge to prove, to defend, to be seen a certain way. Once you remove that urge, your words become deliberate, fewer, sharper, more controlled. Over time, this changes how people perceive you. Not because you say more, but because you say less. Your words carry weight because they are rare. Your presence becomes difficult to read, and what cannot be read cannot be easily challenged. You don't need to dominate conversations. You need to direct them without exposing yourself. Speak when it serves the outcome. Stay silent when it serves your position. Because every word you don't say keeps your advantage intact. And once you understand how silence preserves power, the next shift becomes clear. It's not just about what you say or don't say, it's about when you are present at all. Because constant presence destroys value just as fast as constant talking. The more available you are, the less you are valued, not because people are ungrateful, but because the mind adapts to access. What is constant becomes invisible. What is always there loses weight. That's the mechanism. Familiarity reduces perceived importance, and overexposure kills authority without you noticing it. Most people think being present builds connection. In reality, uncontrolled presence erodes it. When people can reach you anytime, predict your availability, and expect your attention on demand, you stop being a choice and become a default. And defaults are rarely respected. Machiavelli understood that distance creates power, not distance as avoidance, but as positioning. When you are not always accessible, your presence gains meaning. People begin to anticipate you, to interpret your silence, to assign value to your time. Look at a simple pattern. Someone messages you and you respond instantly every time. You're consistent, available, easy to reach. At first it feels like strength, but over time your responsiveness becomes expected. If you delay, once it stands out. Now you're questioned. Why didn't you reply? The dynamic has shifted. You are no longer in control of access. Now reverse it. You respond when it suits your schedule, not their urgency. You don't explain delays. You don't overcompensate. You stay consistent with your own rhythm. What happens? They adjust. They become more intentional with their communication. Your time starts to feel limited. And limited creates value. That's the inversion. You don't chase relevance. You create it through scarcity. This applies beyond communication. Your presence in social spaces, your availability in professional environments, even your emotional accessibility. If people can always predict you, they stop paying attention. But when you are selective, measured, slightly out of reach, you become something else. Not distant, but deliberate. Absence is not disappearance. It's filtration. When you step back without explanation, you reveal who seeks you out and who forgets you. You see who values your presence without needing constant interaction. That clarity is power. It separates noise from alignment. Most people fear absence because they think they'll be forgotten. But the truth is the opposite. People remember what they can't fully access. They replay interactions. They fill in gaps. They project importance onto what is not always available. But this only works if your presence, when it does appear, carries weight. No over-talking, no over-explaining, no overextending, just precision. You don't need to be everywhere to be relevant. You need to be remembered when you're not there. Control your availability the same way you control your words, with intention, with discipline, with awareness of how it shapes perception. Because the moment people stop taking your presence for granted, they start respecting it. And once you are no longer easily accessible, one final layer remains. Not how others see you, not how they reach you, but how you govern the one thing that determines everything, your mind. Because if that isn't under your command, none of this holds. Everything collapses the moment your mind stops obeying you. Not your strategy, not your reputation, not your position, your mind. Because every external move begins as an internal decision, and if that space is unstable, nothing you build will hold. Most people think control is about managing others. It isn't. It's about managing the voice inside you that reacts before you think, that doubts before you act, that drifts when focus is required. That's the mechanism. The mind left undisciplined does not stay neutral. It defaults to fear, distraction, and impulse. And once that happens, you don't need enemies. Your own thinking starts working against you. Machiavelli understood this in a way most people ignore. Power is not sustained through force. It is sustained through internal order. The ability to direct your attention, to override impulse, to stay aligned when everything around you is trying to pull you off course. Look at how most people operate under pressure. Something goes wrong and their thoughts scatter. What if this fails? What if I lose this? What will they think? Their focus fragments, their decisions weaken, and by the time they act, they are already compromised. Now, contrast that with discipline. The same situation, the same pressure, but the response is different. You notice the noise, but you don't follow it. You bring your attention back to what matters. What is the next move? Nothing more. No emotional spiral, no unnecessary projection, just direction. That's the shift. You stop asking how you feel and you start deciding what you do. Most people let their thoughts run freely, assuming awareness is enough. It isn't. Awareness without control is observation without authority. You must train your mind the way you would train a system. Repetition, correction, alignment. When fear appears, you don't negotiate with it. You replace it with logic. When distraction pulls you away, you return to focus without hesitation. When doubt rises, you don't entertain it. You override it with action. Over time, this builds something rare, stability, and stability is misunderstood. It doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means nothing dictates your movement unless you allow it. Once that happens, everything changes. Insults lose meaning because you decide they don't matter. Failure becomes data because you interpret it that way. Pressure becomes direction because you convert it into action. The world cannot control what your mind refuses to validate. That's the final inversion. Power is not in resisting the world. It is in controlling how the world is processed inside you. Because perception can be shaped, emotions can be restrained, presence can be managed. But if your mind is undisciplined, all of it breaks under pressure. Rule your mind and everything else aligns under it. Lose control of it and everything else becomes noise. Your thoughts are not suggestions, they are commands. And if they don't come from you, they will come from everything around you. Decide who is in control. You see it now, control was never about the world. It was always about you. There will be moments right after this where the urge hits. Someone challenges you and you want to explain. Someone misreads you and you feel the need to correct it. Someone disrespects you and your mind pushes you to react. That tension inside you is real. The need to defend, to prove, to regain control of how you are seen. But this is where everything changes. The moment you hold that reaction, something shifts. You stay silent. You don't rush. And suddenly they keep talking. They reveal more than they intended. Their tone changes. Their certainty weakens. Not because you overpowered them, but because you didn't give them access. That is the dynamic. You are no longer reacting. You are selecting. No longer chasing validation. You are defining boundaries. No longer controlled by impulse. You are operating with discipline, from noise to clarity, from reaction to self-command, from exposure to control. If this truth is clear to you, subscribe and stay with it. And write this in the comments, silent control, because once you see it clearly, you don't go back.